Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Darkest Hour. I'm your host, Amanda Jane. Most hauntings feel like something outside of us, a shadow lurking in the corner, objects moving on their own, windows rattling when there's no wind. Not exactly easy to explain, but possible to escape. You can ignore them, run from them, banish them, even try to help them. But sometimes, a haunting isn't just a presence in the room. Sometimes, it's woven into who we are. A connection that can't be broken, no matter how much we cleanse, pray, or try to forget. Tonight, we explore the stories of those who have faced the unshakable. Forces that don't just haunt a place, but follow, linger, and in some cases, may have always been there. Because some hauntings don't come from outside, they come from within. So, let's get started, shall we? My older sister has a ghost that's followed her around for years. She's never been the type to scare easily. She shrugs it off, calls it her ghost, like it's some stray cat that won't leave her alone. But I lived with her for 3 months once. And let me tell you, there was something in that house, and it did not like me being there. Weird things happened constantly. I'd go to bed knowing that every door was locked, every light switch off, but in the morning, the back door would be wide open, lights buzzing, the kettle hissing with steam, like someone had just boiled water, but never poured it. One night, we were getting ready to go out, and I borrowed her liquid foundation, used it, and put it back where she kept her makeup. 10 minutes later, she's asking for it, and it's just gone. She accused me of taking it. Wouldn't hear a word of my protests and made me buy her a new one. A year later, when she was packing to move, she found it, tucked inside a shoebox, with some old letters. The shoebox was zipped up in a suitcase, shoved deep under her bed. And that freaked me out. But the worst, the moment that really got me, it was the only time that I was completely alone in the house. That almost never happened. There was always at least 4 people around. I'd just gotten home from work, headed straight to the bathroom, locked the door. The house was silent, every window shut, every door latched. I was standing there, leaning into the mirror, fingers pressing into my chin to pop a pimple when, "Stop picking your zits." A woman's voice, clear, amused, right outside the bathroom door. I froze, and my heart stuttered in my chest, but my brain did the dumb thing and assumed it was my sister. I laughed, told her to fuck off, asked what she wanted for dinner. Silence. I stepped into the hall. No one there. The air felt thick, charged, kind of like the moment before a thunderstorm. I checked every room. I checked under the beds, in closets, even behind the goddamn shower curtain. I was alone. I grabbed my keys and sat on the front porch until someone else came home. Threads like this make me wish my sister was on Reddit, because God, she has some seriously fucked up stories. A buddy and I were driving through some Texas back roads late one night. It was raining hard, one of those steady downpours where the windshield wipers can barely keep up, and everything outside the headlights turns into a black, shifting blur. Out there aren't streetlights, just stretches of empty road, scattered farmhouses spaced miles apart, open land as far as the eye can see, if he could see anything at all through the rain. We had to slow way down just to stay on the road, creeping along with only the occasional fence line or mailbox breaking up the nothingness. And that's when we saw her. She was walking along the side of the road. Nothing remarkable about her, just a woman, dressed for the weather, head down against the rain, but she was out in the middle of nowhere. And that didn't make any sense. No car nearby, no houses within at least 2 miles. I pointed her out, but my buddy had already seen her. I could tell by the way that he was tightening his grip on the wheel that he was nervous. "Should we stop?" I asked. He didn't answer right away, just kept driving, fingers tapping the steering wheel, like he was weighing something in his head. Finally, he shook his head. "I don't know, man. That's weird." And I agreed it was weird, but that was exactly why we should stop, right? If she was out there in the middle of nowhere in the pouring rain, something must have gone wrong. Maybe her car broke down. Maybe she'd gotten lost. Whatever the reason, she had to be freezing, drenched. But my buddy was uneasy, and since he was driving, he kept going. Still, it nagged at me. Something about it felt off. After a minute, I convinced him to turn around, just to check. We'd gone barely a couple 100 feet before he pulled a slow U-turn, the tires kicking up water. We drove back, high beams on, scanning the road, the ditches, the fields beyond the fences. She wasn't there. The road was empty, just a stretch of wet pavement disappearing into the dark. We slowed even more, brights cutting across the fields. Nothing, no movement. No sign that anyone had been there at all. "She must have cut through to a house or something," my buddy muttered. But he didn't sound convinced. Neither was I. Because there was nowhere to go. The fields were wide open, flat, and muddy as hell. If she'd walked through, there'd be tracks. And even if she had, where was the house? The nearest one was miles up the road. We sat there for a minute, rain hammering on the roof, wipers squeaking against the glass. Eventually, my buddy exhaled sharply, shook his head. "Let's just go." Neither of us said much the rest of the way home. Hello, my name is Heidi. I'm a stay-at-home mother in Larchmont, New York, 23 years old. My son Malachi is 3 years old, and as his vocabulary grows, he's been able to describe more complex things in his environment and express his emotions with more context. His pediatrician says Malachi is advanced for his age. I'm sure he gets that from his dad, but unfortunately, I'm not here to brag about my smart boy. Within the last few weeks, out of nowhere, he's been having night terrors. Every night, he wakes himself up screaming. I've rushed into his room on multiple occasions to find him sitting up in bed, still asleep, screaming so loud, I've worried that his vocal cords might be permanently damaged. I have to shake him awake. He's having the same dream multiple times a week, and I don't know what to do about it, because Mommy can't protect him in dreamland. When Malachi wakes up, he tells me about how he died in a fire. He says that he's always in an office building, wearing clothes like Daddy, which I think means business attire. He says there are other people in the room, all of them sad. Some are gathered around a TV, while others are looking out the window. Malachi says he's been able to walk to both parts of the room in different dreams, and what they're watching on the TV is the same thing happening outside. There's another building next to his, and it's on fire. He sees people waving things and jumping from the windows. He can't see where they land, but he knows they're really high up. People from the floors above him are jumping too. Before the fire reaches them, the people in his room are crying. Then, an explosion shatters all the windows. injuring those who had been looking outside. Smoke and flames fill the room, and then, he says, the sky falls down. The largest fire Malachi has ever been around is our fireplace, and he's never been close enough to even feel the heat. I don't understand where this fear is coming from. One day in August 2013, I went to Mastic Beach in Long Island, New Jersey. Mastic was extremely far from being safe, and someone like me was definitely the minority there. Now this beach is extremely filthy and has rarely ever been cleaned. It was the closest beach from where I lived. The other closest beach was over 35 minutes away, and I only had a learner's permit at the time. I really wasn't supposed to be driving alone at all, but the beach was only 5 minutes away, and there were no police in that area. I arrived at the beach. I saw that there were no cars in sight. I took a chair, towel, handbag out of my car and placed it on the sand. After placing these items down, I walked my way over to the water, put my feet in there. I walked further into the water. Now my knees were in there. I thought about swimming for a second, but I saw that the water was all murky and had algae in it. So what I did was walk out of the water, walk back to the shore. I grabbed my chair, dried myself off with a towel. I wasn't planning on leaving anytime soon because it was hot out and it was very sunny. It was nice. Instead of going back in the water, I decided that I would walk along the Long Beach area. So I proceeded. About 10 minutes into my walk, I started to smell something. At first, I figured that it was just some trash lying around near, or some dead fish. As I continued to walk forward, the smell kept getting stronger and stronger. The whole time walking, I didn't look in any direction other than in front of me. I was still walking, looking only at 12 o'clock. I felt my foot hit something hard and hairy. I looked down, and what I saw was something that you'd hear in a horror story. Right below me was the lifeless head of an old woman, and her eyes and mouth were open wider than humanly possible. As I saw this, I screamed like a little girl and ran so fast, like I was on steroids. When I got back to my chair, I threw up immediately from running so fast and from the gut-wrenching sight that I had just seen. I got my phone out of my bag and called the police. I then connected to a 911 dispatcher, told her everything that she needed to know. She then told me to stay put where I was at, as the police would be on their way. When the police arrived, I told them where the body was. They thanked me, told me to go home because they were going to shut down the beach area. It was under investigation. I would say about 3 weeks had passed when one morning I turned on the news, like I would always do, and I saw that the dead woman had finally been identified. Her name was Diane Ross, and she was 63. It was also revealed that the cause of her death was murder, as she'd been stabbed in the back of her neck. I was in such disbelief. They were never able to trace the DNA to whoever had killed her. The killer had never been caught, which I guess is the scariest part about all of this. As of today, I never went back to that beach, and I never will. I have also moved to a different and more wealthier town in Long Island, where it's more safe, the crime rate is low. Although this was 11 years ago, it still feels like it was yesterday. Time flies fast. A friend of mine lived in this really old building, a real relic, built sometime in the early 1800s in a tiny Texas town that looked like it hadn't changed much since. His apartment was upstairs with businesses below. The whole place had originally been some kind of small factory, but over the years it had been chopped up, repurposed into modern living spaces. Of course, modern is a stretch. There were plenty of reminders that this place wasn't originally meant to be lived in. The weirdest one? The small door in the closet that led to, well, nothing really. Just an odd, empty space between the walls, like a forgotten gap in the architecture. It didn't seem to serve a purpose, except for occasionally blowing itself open with an icy draft, which he chalked up to bad remodeling. And that's the same reasoning he used for the noises that he'd sometimes hear from behind it. Soft rustling, quiet thuds. The kind of thing you hear and convince yourself that it's just the building settling, even when it doesn't quite sound like that. And then there were the windows. They'd be open, randomly, not just the ones that he and his girlfriend had opened, but others, ones that neither of them had touched. He'd come home and find them open, close them, and then later they'd be open again. At first he figured that the latches were old and loose, maybe weak enough to give way over time. It was weird, sure, but not enough to lose sleep over. That changed the day that he stayed home from work. He was in the kitchen when he heard it. Click. The unmistakable sound of a window latch popping open. Then another. Then another. One after the other, moving in a line across the apartment, as if someone was walking through the living room, unlatching them, one by one. And then, all at once, they swung open. Every single one. He grabbed his keys and left. No hesitation. Spent the rest of the day somewhere, anywhere else. When he came back that weekend, he tried to find some kind of logical explanation, checking the latches, looking for drafts, anything that could have caused it. Everything seemed normal. For a while, nothing weird happened again. Then, a month later, his girlfriend stayed home alone. She called him, freaking out, saying that it had just happened to her. The windows, one after the other, and then all of them at once. At that point, they both just accepted it. The windows were weird. The building was weird. Maybe the whole town was weird. Whatever, it wasn't dangerous, right? And then they got the dog. It was a puppy, stupidly happy, always running around, chewing on stuff it wasn't supposed to, doing all the things puppies do. But there were moments, specific moments, when all of that stopped. Whenever the closet door blew open or the windows unlatched, the puppy would freeze. It would stop playing, stop wagging its tail, just go completely still. And then it would watch something. Its eyes would lock onto a point in the room where, as far as they could tell, there was nothing. And then, without breaking focus, its gaze would slowly track across the space, like it was following someone moving through the apartment. They never saw anything, never heard anything, but the dog did. And after the third or fourth time it happened, they decided they weren't going to wait around to figure out what it was that was watching. They moved out. No second thoughts, no regrets, just gone. I had just picked up my boyfriend, and we stopped at my place so I could take a bath before heading to my mom's house. We'd only been dating for about a week, so no, we weren't at that stage yet. Plus, I'm a pretty private person, and he's a bit of a prankster, so while he stayed outside on the porch to smoke a cigarette, I went inside, back to my bedroom, and locked the door behind me. Well, put the chain on, actually. My room is small, no closets, no dark corners, nowhere for someone to hide. The only window sticks and takes a ridiculous amount of effort and noise to open. I ran the bath, got in, and started washing my hair, and then movement. Out of the corner of my eye, something shifted. Before I could fully turn my head, a hand shot out and grabbed the handle of the bathroom door, slamming it shut. For a second, I didn't react, didn't scream, didn't panic. I just laughed. Thought my boyfriend had somehow slipped in behind me and was messing around. I stepped out of the tub, yanked the door. No one was there. The chain on the bedroom door was still latched. The window hadn't budged. There was nowhere for anyone to go. I walked the room in circles, checking everything. My stomach slowly sinking with that awful, skin-prickling feeling of wrongness. When I finally made it outside, my boyfriend was still exactly where I had left him, on the porch, finishing his cigarette. And that was only the beginning. A few days later, the light started flickering. Annoying, but nothing exactly terrifying. I live in a double wide, so bad wiring seemed like the logical explanation. But then one night, I was heading to the kitchen for a glass of water when the hall light suddenly went out. Again, not a big deal. But then the broom, propped behind the washer, fell over, slamming across the hallway, cutting off my path. I sighed, annoyed, but before I could move it, a shadow darted past me, straight into the kitchen. I barely caught the shape, tall, fast, pitch black. My first thought was my cat, until I turned around and saw her sitting on my bed, watching me, tail flicking. I went straight back to my room and shut the door. The next day, my fountain drink exploded. No reason. It wasn't hot, it wasn't cold, the air conditioner wasn't on. There was no one near it. It just burst. Sticky soda everywhere. I started to think I was losing it. But then my boyfriend and a few friends started mentioning weird things happening when they came over too. And here's the thing, I hadn't told anyone about my own experiences yet. I still see things sometimes. Tall shadows shifting near the bathroom. Quick darting figures in my peripheral vision. I tell myself it's just my cat. I tell myself it's my mind playing tricks on me. I've even been to therapy. Schizophrenia was ruled out. Seasonal depression, sure. Maybe that could explain some of it. If so, I'd almost be grateful. At least then my brain could make sense of it. But I know what I saw. I know what happened. And I don't need to prove it to anyone. If you've had something like this happen, just know they can't hurt you. It's weird, it's scary, but once you've been through it, nothing else in the dark seems quite as bad. My daughter called me from the future, and I wrote this a little while ago about it. I have a 3-year-old daughter now. About 3.5 years ago, when my wife was pregnant with her, I got a phone call from an unknown number. When I picked it up, it was a little girl who called me Daddy. I told her, "Sorry, but you have the wrong number." And she answered, "No, you're my daddy." I proceeded to tell her, "No, I don't have a daughter." And the little girl said in one of the creepiest little kid voices that I can remember, "Oh yes you do, Daddy." And then I was so freaked out and strung out on caffeine that I just hung up. My wife asked what had happened, and I joked that our daughter had called me from the future. Sure enough, a few months later we did have a little girl, and I was a daddy. Fast forward to yesterday. I was taking care of her and moving some boxes, and I heard her on the phone with Grandma. At first I thought nothing of it, and then I realized she must have used the auto dial herself, and I was impressed. And then I realized I needed to ask some questions and put the phone out of reach to prevent unwanted 911 calls and the like. When they were done talking, I asked her who she had called, and she said, "Just Grandma and you." I'm 100% sure that she didn't phone me yesterday, even though she maintains it and says that we talked. I checked the call log. It has dozens of phone numbers on auto dial, ones that she tried, and our home number is one of them. So sure, maybe it's just a coincidence, but it's a bit spooky. I fall asleep to your content every night, and recently it had me thinking of my own experiences and which one would be the strangest to share. Here goes. I'm an older woman now and have had many experiences that some would most likely call paranormal. This story is from when I was about 13 or 14 years old, so eons ago. I had a set of uncles and a cousin who lived in a neighborhood house. The house was owned by family friends who lived there first and then ended up renting it out to my family. I'd always heard stories from those friends and then my own family about their experiences in the house. A lot of those experiences surrounded an apparition of a little girl, about 4 to 6 years old. Remember that. Now, from the outside, this house was normal looking. A 2-story, light blue house. Nothing distinct about it. Nothing abnormal from the outside. It had 7 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and 2 sets of stairs leading upstairs. We often used the back door and the back staircase to get upstairs, because most of the hauntings took place around the front set of stairs. So that staircase had always been blocked off since as long as I could remember. Around the time I turned 13 or 14, my mom and I ended up having to stay there for a while due to financial issues that she was going through. I remember always feeling like everything was so dark in there and never wanting to be alone. But after visiting many times and then actually living there for a little while, I had never really experienced anything myself. So I started to think that maybe everyone was making things up or smoked too many J's or something. My mom and I had the 2 front bedrooms upstairs, closest to the blocked-off stairway. The first room had these 2 front-facing windows, and the second bedroom was right behind it with side-facing windows. This first really freaky thing that happened wasn't so much paranormal, but crazy nonetheless. At the time, my best friend was V, and we were both outcasts through and through, best of besties, hung out every day, skipped school all the time, all of that. A while after we started staying at this house, I took V up to the room I was staying in. We walked in, and the first thing she said was, "Oh my God, no fucking way." Of course, I had no idea what she was talking about, so I asked. V started crying and said, "Remember when I told you about that dream? The one that I always have, where I'm a little girl sitting in the window and I fall out the window and I die?" I'm literally getting chills recounting this. She kept going, telling me this was the room. These were the windows from the dream that she'd had countless times. So we talked about it a little. I was getting creeped out because she was so emotional, and I really had no reason not to believe her. She wasn't one to lie or make things up. And I'd never told her about the little ghost girl that people had seen. We ended up coming to the conclusion that maybe, in a past life, she'd lived and died there, and that the apparition of the little girl that people kept seeing was possibly her from another life. Up to this point, nothing really paranormal had happened to me, but about 2 nights later, after V and the window incident, I got a full-on taste of it. I was sound asleep in that same front room. I had a pet rat named Freddy who was in a cage on the left side of my bed. I woke up to Freddy screeching as loud as he could, like nothing I'd ever heard him do before. I sat up and he climbed up the side of his cage, screeching at the top of his little lungs, clawing at the side of the cage. I was literally like, what's going on? I went to stand up and out of nowhere, a pen came flying at my face from the area of the window. It stopped right in front of my eyes and dropped to the floor. I was not on drugs or alcohol. I was only 13 or 14, didn't party, had no mental health issues. This 100% happened. I was so scared I ran to the other room where my mom was and laid down with her. The whole night I had awful nightmares. The one I distinctly remember was of a huge, bloodshot eye with red and blue lights flashing behind it, looking at me through the window in the room my mom was in, the one that I was in with her that night. The other dreams were full of dark shadows, being lost, and just odd stuff like that. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. I started to remember everything from the night before, so I went to check on Freddie. He was okay, acting normal. I looked down, and that pen was still right there, where it had fallen in front of my face the night before. I didn't pick up that pen. I don't know who did. It stayed there for weeks, and then one day it just wasn't there anymore. That was the only experience in that house that I would actually consider paranormal. That was horrible to recount. It's been a very long time since I've thought about that night in such depth. Thanks for listening. Well, friends, it appears we've reached the end of tonight's episode. And thanks for joining me. Whether it's your first time or you're a regular, your support means the world over here. We've got brand new episodes every Friday night. Keep those eyes open long enough to find those deep sleep videos. And of course, subscribe, tap the bell, and you'll never miss a thing. Special thanks to the Darkest Hour channel members: Lori TESDAHL, Sarah Marie, Robert Bailey, COLTDADDY Eagle, Mallory Dominguez, Gary Watkins, PILAR Gio, TREDEN WIXSON, Larry Hill, and RIPLEY. Big thanks to those who shared their stories, and a huge shout out to all of our patrons: Tracy S, Mary H, Tanya F, Tamara K, Monica L, ZoeWatt, Chelle B, Donald C, Marion T, Batgirl, Alisha S, Erin G, Nikki H, Mr. Revenant, Naz K, Brendon G, Paul T, Nicholas C, Tony P, Lissane, Arlene F, Adrian, TF Parham, Jason G, and Lori T. If you want to support the Darkest Hour in other ways, consider joining our Patreon. Check out patreon.com/thedarkesthour or click the link in the description to learn more. Do you have stories like these? I'd love to share them. Send them to me, Amanda, darkesthour@gmail.com, or on the Darkest Hour subreddit, The Darkest Hour YT. Stay spooky.